Good evening. I'm calling to order this regular Planning Commission meeting for Tuesday, July 12th, 2016. Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. So it is now time for the swearing in of commissioners by the town clerk, Rebecca Vaughn. So Jennifer, Phyllis, and Robert must all be sworn in individually. Are you going to do this simultaneously or individually?
Thank you. Yes, we will do this simultaneously. Please stand. And then repeat after me, please. I state your name.
I, Robert Bundy,
Do solemnly affirm
do solemnly affirm
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully discharge
and I will well and faithfully discharge
the duties upon which I am about to enter.
the duties on which I'm about to enter.
Thank you and congratulations.
Thank you very much. Now that we have a 5-member commission, will you please call the roll?
Sure. Commissioner Metcalf.
Present.
Commissioner Bundy.
Here.
Commissioner Chase.
Here.
Commissioner Friedman.
Here.
Commissioner Caldera.
Here.
And I believe tonight is the night that we are obligated to elect officers.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, actually, we didn't have it on the agenda this evening. So what I'm proposing to do is that we actually, when we get to the end of the agenda and when we discuss agenda items for the next meeting, we'll put it on the next
Okay.
meeting's agenda and
So that's
have
what
the
we'll do
elections
then.
then. No, it wasn't on, we didn't include it on the agenda. Apologize for that.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, then we'll move right on to the public comment section of tonight's agenda. This is the section of the agenda where anyone in the public can comment on something that is not on the agenda tonight. So please, if you have something on your mind, step up to the microphone and you have 3 minutes to itemize your thoughts. Seeing no one stepping up to the microphone tonight for this open session, we'll close the public comment section. And we'll move directly to the one business item we have tonight. And this is a preliminary review of the proposed residential subdivision called Robin Drive Phase 2. This is 16 single-family detached homes and 8 second units on a vacant lot south of Paradise Drive at Robin Drive. So, Mr. Wolf has a presentation to make, then we will hear from the applicant, and then we will have public comment. And then they will hear from us. This is a night in which no action will be taken. This is merely to hear the presentation and provide some feedback, if any, from the public and the commission. So please, Adam.
Thank you, Chairman Chase, commissioners, and thanks for that description of what we're here to do tonight. This is a study session for a preliminary review of a proposal by Aimco Robin Drive LP for a proposal to develop a new residential subdivision on vacant land near the eastern boundary of Corte Madera, adjacent to the town of Tiburon. I want to stress again that this is an early opportunity for some preliminary feedback based on information that is available at this time for the applicant based on comments either presented by the staff here tonight. It's a chance to ask questions of staff as well, or comments from the public as well. So no application has been submitted at this point, and so we really are at a preliminary phase here. I understand the applicant has also had some neighborhood meetings before this as well. But I think it's a great chance for the commission to also get a preview of this proposal. Again, no action or decisions will be made. Really, comments are intended to serve as guidance only tonight. So just some background. I'm going to start with some background, and then I've also, in the staff report, I'm going to follow basically along with the staff report this evening. Probably take about 10, 15 minutes, answer questions, and I think the applicant has about a 20-minute, 25-minute presentation as well. Aimco Robin Drive LP, we're looking here, sort of looking south on an aerial view of the Tiburon Peninsula here, the eastern boundary of Corte Madera, and where it abuts the town of Tiburon boundary as well. Aimco also, they're the property owners of this property here, which is called the Preserve at this point in time, was recently rehabilitated by Aimco and was approved for design review in 2012 and rehabilitated and I think opened at some point in the last year for occupancy. 7 buildings, 128 rental units are located on this site. And Aimco also owns, as you can see outlined in this dashed white line, the 2 properties both to the south, or we're calling the upper parcel or the south parcel, and the lower north parcel. And one of the things we'll get into here is actually one parcel, but actually split into 2 zoning lots or zoning districts. So actually, I'll get into that right now. So what we have is the lower parcel, or the north parcel, is zoned R1, medium density residential, and the upper parcel or south parcel is zoned R1C, open residential, and a much lower density zoning district. The entire lot, which again is outlined in white here, is within also the Hillside Land Capacity Overlay District, which requires geotechnical analyses, special site planning, and restricts allowable density based on slope, stability, hazards, and grading considerations. And there are special findings that are associated with that overlay district. In addition, I think importantly, this particular site is also designated as a high housing potential site, site number 3, in the Corte Madera housing element, which was adopted last year in 2015. There are specific policies related to the site that are outlined in the housing element itself. I've included in the staff report an attachment to some excerpts from the housing element, which go into some detail. In fact, there was some analysis done in the housing element in terms of the allowable density based on the hillside land capacity designation and what that means in terms of actually the number of units that could be developed on the site. The housing element explains how to use the sort of the methodology and the equations in the somewhat of a complex equation of how to get to the maximum capacity on the site, and explains again in attachment 2 that you could have about 15 units in this lower north parcel and 1 unit in the upper parcel. Additionally, the housing element, I think somewhat uniquely expresses a policy that would require second units on this site as part of any development here, and mentions that half of the town shall require that half of the units that are developed here also contain second units. And this is part of the larger push in the housing element and through adopted policies to encourage the development of second units as a way to achieve affordable housing goals in the town. So again, those, if you have questions about that, that is in the staff report. Happy to answer questions about that as well. So what I've done in the staff report is I've outlined some specific, I would say, topics that I believe would be helpful feedback for the applicant at this early stage. Again, we're sort of at a high level here. We're not getting into the minutia of the proposed plan. It's still at a relatively a conceptual level, but I think there are some important items that would be helpful for the applicant to hear and would be helpful for the commission to consider at this point, given that there's several steps ahead and the applicant ultimately is intending to submit an application and go through the necessary environmental analysis, application review, and then down the road would come back to this body and ultimately the town council in public hearings. So what I've highlighted here, I think first and foremost is an issue that's peculiar to, I think, the applicant in a sense that currently the Corte Madera zoning ordinance requires one of the dwelling units on a site containing second units to be owner occupied. Aimco is not, they're not proposing to, they are proposing to rent all of the proposed units and maintain ownership of the site. And I think they can get and explain that their business model and why they are proposing this development as a rental project rather than a ownership project. And as such, Aimco is proposing to modify that owner occupancy requirement. And I think you'll hear from them this evening some justification for why they believe it is justified to actually modify that requirement, given that they are an on-site management company and are actively interested in maintaining the property and screening tenants and so forth. Secondly, actually, I did have a slide. That's just another view of it, but I did have some of these considerations bulleted up here. For the sake of moving the discussion forward, if there are several different ways of potentially modifying the owner occupancy requirement, again outlined in the staff report on page 2. And really the distinction between the various ways that this could be done, it really relates to how broadly any modification to that owner occupancy rule would be applied, whether it's site specific, whether it's a little bit more broad to subdivisions of 5 or more units as described. There's a housing element policy related to that, or whether it's townwide. So it's really about the breadth of the application of any proposed modification. And I think the applicant's interest obviously is not necessarily in anything other than its project. But again, there are some townwide, there are some policies expressed in the housing element that discuss that the town might be interested in changing the rules or requiring second units elsewhere in town and subdivisions, and that might be an opportunity as well if the commission thought that it was appropriate to change the owner occupancy rules more broadly. Another item that I think would be helpful to touch on this evening would be related to affordability. The housing element assumes that the production of second units, based on recent surveys of market rate rents charged in Marin County for second units, equates to the production of units affordable to low and moderate income units. Essentially, those second units, as designed because of their small size, in and of themselves are what would otherwise qualify as a quote-unquote affordable unit. Therefore, the housing element does not assume that specific rent restrictions for second units are necessary to achieve affordability. Commission could provide guidance regarding its expectations for assuring that these second units in this proposed project achieve the town's housing affordability goals and how that might actually be accomplished. I think site planning is another important factor, and I'll let the applicant really get into that with our architects are here this evening as well to discuss an idea of clustering development at a portion of the site rather than spreading the development out as the existing zoning would otherwise require. There's also a plan wanted to point out, let's see if I can get this back, there we go. There's also, I think, worth discussing the upper parcel plan where a single home is proposed to be developed and how that fits in with the town's guidelines regarding the siting of single-family homes and views and ridges and things like that. There are several findings, and I have those at the back of the presentation at that time if the commission wants to discuss those findings related to that. And then there's architectural design, which is more of again, at a high level, you'll hear from the applicant about what their ideas are for the architecture for the site, and I'm sure they'd appreciate some feedback regarding their ideas and on materials and other issues there. So you'll hear from the applicant next, and I'm available to answer questions that you might have at this point, obviously also later in the evening tonight as well.
Thank you, Adam. That, I think, describes as an overview. So it's a wide open proposal right now. With that said, I'm going to ask the other commissioners if they would like Adam to answer any questions about what he has presented to us at this point. I know we all have questions for the applicant. So starting with Phyllis Metcalf.
Not at this time.
All right, Dr. Bundy.
Not at this time.
All right, Nicolo.
I have a question, and I don't know if that's the right question or not, but so far, for what you've seen on this possible application, is there any legal element or condition which would allow or justify a change on the owner occupancy requirements from the from the zoning law right now? That something that is tangible, that says, well, this really allows for considering a possible change.
You're asking if there's any policy direction on that?
No, if there's any condition, special condition on the site, or that makes it unique. And
well, I think on the owner occupancy issue, I think one way to look at it is, what is the purpose of having the owner occupancy requirement in the first place? And I think there are some, we can make some assumptions about that, but I think the applicant, and you'll hear from the applicant, as typically what we see is a single-family home, potentially up on, whether it's Christmas Tree Hill or whether it's Chapman Park or whether it's down in the flat, they'll have, you know, a second unit on one lot that's owned by one single-family homeowner. This is, I'll just say, this is not a typical situation you would see, where you have a one company that owns several properties and manages a large number of units on site. So in that regard, I think that is a distinction to make potentially between this site and other ways in which the owner occupancy provision we usually see, or it usually works in Corte Madera.
Thank you. All right. Is that it for you, Nicola? All right,
Yes,
Jennifer, do
thanks.
you have anything you want to ask Adam at this point? We'll come back to them if you want to wait.
I just have one point of clarification. Between in the housing element, is it not stipulated that it has to be condos or for sale product? It can be either one. So is that almost an inherent conflict in the housing element, or is it just that it's assumed that it's going to be for sale product?
Well, the housing element, as far as I understand it, it doesn't really say whether or not it's going to be rental or for sale. I think it assumes market rate and then second units, and so it doesn't really get into that. I think it's setting more of a broad policy, but in my reading of all the different documents, that, you know, I think it's fair to say that this may not have been assumed to be, this model was anticipated. I don't, you know, so.
If what you're asking, there's no indication from the records that it was intentionally programmed to be exclusively for sale. It just is during the housing element that's how the conditions were placed, that you presumed that this particular area of land would be this owner occupied with a second
Yeah,
unit. But
and
there's
I-
nothing that required it to be either for sale or rental at the adoption of the housing plan.
And I think just the experience of subdivisions in Corte Madera has mostly been in R1 districts and in single-family home districts has been for sale housing. So I think that's just,
Which is why it was
That's the-
required that there were second units, but it wasn't.
yes,
The
but it didn't,
concept wasn't
I
that
see
it
what you're
was-
saying.
that's
It
why
didn't
we're
take that
doing
extra
that.
step to say, yeah, to anticipate that it might be
Rental.
in this situation, exactly.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. I think that as traditionally second units get built,
And I-
simply that it
Yeah,
comes
and
out of
I will
owner.
say, I think if you know, there was at one point a discussion about this during the housing element, and it was decided at that point that we would wait to have the discussion about whether or not it should be rental or owner occupancy until there was a project in front of the, you know, to discuss. And so that's where we are.
Thank you, Adam. I just think in communities, stability of second units and the control of them resides with the property owner rather than the renter, and that's why it's always been so important to have it as a owner-occupied unit. All right, that said, I would like to invite the applicant to make their presentation at this time. So there's a fair number of applicant individuals here, but we'll start with
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and fellow commissioners. There are a fair number of applicant people, but we'll try and be brief. I'm Patty Schwader. I'm Senior Vice President of AIMCO. I wanted to set the stage a little bit and give you a little background on our company, since we're talking about rental and owners and sort of what we do. We're the owners of Preserve at Marin. We bought that property in 2011. At the time, it was in a little bit of disrepair. It had been vacant for a very long time. Our business model is really what you've seen us do at Preserve at Marin. We buy properties in exceptional locations and add value and build communities through redevelopment. The Preserve is a very special place. We might say it's an irreplaceable location. As I said, it had been empty and was eerily quiet. $125 million later, which we put in that community, the preserve is a showpiece. And if you haven't been there, we would love to take you through. It's really a jewel of our portfolio and a jewel of Corte Madera. It's now home to 126 families who enjoy totally upgraded apartments, grounds, gardens, a new lifestyle center, dog park, fitness center, infinity pool within walking distance, great schools, and of course, hiking up Ring Mountain and beyond. So the subject of tonight is the land surrounding preserve. We acquired that in 2013. And we're proposing these new single-family residents there. Why did we do that? First, we love the area. Second, we're our own best neighbors. We're a rental company, but we can control who rents, the maintenance, the grounds, and the general caliber of the development there. We want to provide a new development that is beautiful in keeping with the surrounding topography and the neighborhood here. Who better to assure that there's exceptional homes there than a professional management company that lives next door and that will be managing this site? As Adam said, it is a unique situation. I don't think anybody contemplated that actually when we brought Preserve, it was for sale. It was condos. And it was rental before that. So it's traded back and forth, but I don't think anybody really looked at what's rental and what's not. But what I can promise you is these are high quality, expensive rentals, and that's what we intend to do on the rest of the site. We spent the last year or so really looking at what is possible here. We looked at a higher density development that is possible on the site. But we also consulted city leaders, held a bunch of neighborhood meetings, went one-on-one to meet with folks, and looked carefully at the city's housing element, which Adam described so perfectly. And the plan we discussed tonight is really the product of that. It is the same density as called for in the housing element. The second units are the same number as in the housing element. And in fact, these second units provide 1/2 of the town's commitment to second units, all in one development, 1/2 of the promised units. We've tried to design this, and you'll see in our request as we go through the presentation, to be of minimal impact to the neighbors while blending gracefully into the hillside. So we need a little consideration on some of these, and it's a PD overlay that we need to be able to cluster the development to stay out of the way of the neighborhoods and provide a community, and also to deal with the second unit issue where the PD overlay would provide the flexibility. Again, second units in Corte Madera are rental. It's who's in the primary unit. We own the whole property, so in one way, you have one owner, but there will be different people living in those units. So we want to, without further ado, I want to go through the project. Brett Lenhart here is our VP of redevelopment. He's going to share the project with you. We have Steve Cordes here, our Senior Vice President of Redevelopment, who actually developed the original property, the Preserve at Marin. Our architects from BAR are here to talk, and Riley Hurd, our zoning attorney, is here. Would you please ask him the tough questions? He's probably better at it than we are. So with that, I'll turn it over to Brett.
Thank you, Patty. Thank you, Planning Commission and townspeople. My name is Brett Lenhart. I'm a vice president with AIMCO. Thank you again for your time. What I'm here to do is set the stage for how we arrived at the plan, and talk a little bit about, kind of lead in for Jeff. Oh, I change the slides here. Got jostled around a little bit. Apologies. So what I'm here to do is set the stage. When we were tasked with setting up this development, we took a very holistic approach. Essentially, we stepped back and we made a big list of what the sensitive receptors would be on the site. What are the things to avoid? What are the things to be cautious about, to be sensitive to? We listed those out, and then we did just that. We tried to avoid them. We used the housing element as a baseline for our design. That is really the core of our design, and we'll come back to that several times tonight. We hired respective planners within the community to look at this before we ever had a plan laid out. That was really told us sort of how to shape and mold the site. As Adam walked you through, there's a very unique condition of a single parcel split into 2 zoning districts. And what we were really working with was 3 layers: a base zoning layer, an HLC, hillside zoning, and then a housing element on top. And blending those and finding a strategy is what we're here to do today, and hear your feedback. It's a 15.2 acre site together. It's split roughly 50-50. Top acre, the upper side is 8 acres. What Aimco seeks to do is put exactly 15 homes with 8 second units on the lower site and 1 home on the upper site, per the housing element. We're interested today in your feedback. We're interested in hearing from you. We know that this is the beginning of a design process, that this is the beginning, and we're looking forward to working with you on it. So without further ado, I'm here to introduce Jeff Goodwin of BAR Architects. We selected BAR because they have a specialty in single-family homes and understanding this product type. Jeff?
Thank you, Brett. Thank you, commissioners. As Adam and Brett have alluded to, I mean, we're just at the very beginning of this process, but we have started just when we started work with Aimco in 2014. We did take all of these issues that Brett and Adam have described, and really started thinking about what's the most appropriate response to the site and to these zoning overlays. And so we started by basically diagramming. Oh, that's interesting. It's missing some color. Huh. Okay. So we started by diagramming basically the opportunities and constraints, is what we call them, on the site. And so here the orange basically is the portions of the site that have been disturbed. There is a lighter orange, it's not reading very well on this slide, which was basically the developable area on the site. In addition, we mapped out the areas of the site that were greater than 30% slope. Those are prohibited from being developed. And then we took the R1 and hillside land capacity overlay and basically looked at what could be done based on those zoning requirements. And this is literally, quite literally, just kind of what the zoning says is allowable. And as we looked at this and we reviewed it with Aimco, I think we all kind of collectively said, you know, we think we can do better than this. We think the site deserves better than this. So we came back and we looked at a site plan. This is out of order. Yeah, okay. So we came back and looked at trying to take and really achieve and address 4 conditions. One was the setbacks and trying to create a buffer around the perimeter of the site, which was respectful of the adjacent property owners, and also emphasized kind of this as a community and created kind of a sense of community within our development. We really wanted to respect the trees and the existing vegetation, so we really looked very carefully at the siting of each. Okay, okay. I apologize. I'm not sure why this is not shown up correctly.
Yeah. We have it here to look at.
Okay.
I'm sorry, the public can.
So I'm gonna follow the order of this brochure here because anyway, so the green you see on these maps designates the vegetation, and then fourthly, we really wanted to make sure that we respected and incorporated into the development the existing water course that was there, which you can see right there. And so that's what we've done. What it resulted in was really kind of creating a larger setback around the perimeter and a tighter kind of setback within our own development. That's okay. No, this would be good because we can actually look at the tables. What's the one right down here, bottom right on that bar? Excellent. Can I advance that with this? Okay. Yep, okay. Thank you, Adam. So basically what we ended up with is, where we are at this point in time is this site plan, which, as I said, creates a larger buffer around the perimeter, some tighter setbacks within the development on our own property. And, the intent is really to really foster this sense of neighborhood. These are the maps that we were talking about before. There's a diagram with those the previous opportunities and constraints and our proposed kind of clustering of the homes. From there, I wanted to kind of just briefly talk about the site plan as it stands now on the upper site. This zoning allows one residential unit, which is what we're proposing. The site itself is kind of has got a steep kind of embankment right above the parking lot. Then there's a small kind of terraced area, another steep section, and at the top of that is where we're looking at locating the second unit. It is significantly below the highest elevation on the, I guess that's really the south end of the property, the right edge as we look at it now. And that is actually significantly below the ridge line. So the intent and even this siting really anticipates complying with all of the ridgeline development requirements of your zoning code. We went through the same exercise, which I don't need to repeat, but looked at the opportunities and constraints. Here, there's the developable areas rather large, but we also have some star tulip kind of clusters of plantings that we wanted to make sure that we avoided. And, the development that we're proposing is kind of right between these two pieces there. And with that, Brett, I will give it back to you. The one point that I missed here that I wanted to just talk about, I'm sorry, was in this development, as Patty noted, we are looking to get the PD overlay. But basically, we've met all of the zoning requirements in terms of setback, the portions of the site that are developable. The only thing that really requires a PD development is as I said, the internal kind of setbacks between the units that we're proposing. With that, okay, you'll jump back to that? Okay, so we'll come back to that. So maybe with that, we have just started kind of the design process, but we have kind of put our heads together with AIMCO, thought a little bit about what, the style and what the imagery for the project should be. And we were collectively kind of inspired by the Bay Area regionalism that was developed after the war. The architecture of Joe Esherick and Ehrlich and William Worcester. So, the thought there was that architecture was developed really in response to California's climate. We have a wonderful climate. It encourages outdoor use, a lifestyle that was kind of less formal than would have been done previously, and a real reliance on kind of architecture that was expressive of the materials being used. And so those were things that kind of resonated with us. We thought were appropriate for the development. We thought, those are some pretty great architects that kind of use their backs to climb up on. And so that's what we're doing, or that's at least what we've started to this point. This is a quick little rendering that would show a view from the site looking back towards Corte Madera Bay. And one of the other things that we really want to do is create a sustainable community. So we're starting to think about what design strategies make sense, what are appropriate to the project. Those would include long-lasting, durable materials that have natural finishes, a real inclusion of natural vegetation into the architecture, permeable materials, orientation of buildings that's responsive to wind and sun, potentially the ability to utilize some of the sun's energy for either, PV or hot water. So those are all things that as we develop the design further, we want to look at and really evaluate how they might get incorporated. The other thing we did was we looked at the site, and it really has kind of two conditions. There's a flatter section in the middle, and then the perimeter has steeper hillsides. And so in clustering these, what we did was we developed two unit types. We developed a two-story unit type for the flat area, which has a tuck-under garage, which this is a quick little rendering on. And we also developed a I'm sorry, I'm backwards. This is a three-story unit that's tucked up against the hillside. You can't see it here. The next rendering will show you, shows it stepping up the hillside. But what it does do is it kind of breaks down the roof mass. It creates its own kind of outdoor spaces, outdoor rooms, and really kind of minimizes the mass when seen from above. And this is the two-story unit or home, I'm sorry, that was developed for the flatter area. And here you can also see this idea that really the indoor-outdoor spaces are connected, and we take advantage of the wonderful weather here and the outdoor spaces that we can create between the buildings. Relative to landscape, again, we will work through this a lot more as we bring a landscape architect on board, but just even at this very conceptual level, the idea is to use materials which are durable and long-lasting, which are extensions of the architecture, plant materials which are native, drought-resistant, and to really kind of, when we're done with it, make it feel like, the development really had very little impact on what was there naturally. Same rendering, just without all the notes. And again, this will all be developed to a much greater extent, but I think the idea is to get some initial feedback, thoughts from people in terms of this approach and what we're proposing. And I guess with that, Brett, I'll hand it back to you.
Sure. Thanks, Jeff. Just to take a quick step back, I wanted to touch on one item, and that was our outreach efforts to date. AIMCO has gone through. Before I say that, as I said before, the design that you've seen has been a part of a process where we stepped back and looked at all these different indicators, all these different sensitive topics on this site. And a lot of those came from the public, come from our neighbors in Corte Madera, our neighbors in Tiburon, our residents, local businesses. And what we did was we went through the effort of consolidating those into some hot topics that we saw. We went ahead and published those in our concept design. We wanted to get out in front of them, discuss them, and not a typical move by any means. And it's just something to show that our process is iterative and it involves everyone. So we don't need to go through these line by line, but I wanted to touch on it because I think it's important as a part of our mentality towards our approach to this site. Looking forward to hearing your comments. And again, thank you very much for your time.
All right, so does that constitute what you guys want to throw on the table then? So.
And I just wanted to say one thing. We did have some display copies in the back. I think we had 3 or 4 of these for the audience to take a look at. And in addition, there's also an email list that you can sign up for, and we will be developing an email notification list for this project as this progresses. So please sign up if you want to receive those.
Thank you, Adam. On our dais tonight are some comments from neighbors.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that reminder. We did receive a couple of comments. There's an email that came in today from a neighbor on Paradise Drive that you have before you, also in the back for the audience if they want to take a look at that. I also received a call today. The email expresses some concern, as you can read, about changing zoning or changing existing requirements for the second units, the owner occupancy requirements. And I also spoke to a neighbor verbally today who expressed actually support for the project, but was really concerned about Paradise Drive and the landscaping in front of Paradise Drive as the commenter lived across the street.
All right. Thank you. The reason I brought it up in part is that one of the comments is about being notified appropriately. So being that this is a study session, what are the requirements for neighborhood notification for this?
Well, I think there's standards that the department has, then there's legal requirements, and there aren't any necessarily legal requirements for a preliminary hearing other than just publishing the agenda and putting it on the agenda. But we go through great lengths, I think, to get out and advertise much more broadly than that. And we put out, 500-foot notices and paper notices. Unfortunately, it seems like some may have not actually been received, and we'll have to look into why that's the case. But we do that. We put it up on our website as a news flash. I believe our town clerk, Rebecca Vaughn, also put it out on Nextdoor, and a notification regarding that, posted in public places. And we act as if it is a formal public hearing to try to get the word out. But I think, this is also an early stage, and we'll improve upon it as best we can.
As always do, and always somehow some people get
And
missed.
I think the email list is actually another, that's worked pretty well in the past. As people come to these meetings, they can sign up.
Right.
And
All right, so with that said, who will stand up and field questions from the commission to start with? Will that be you, Patricia, or?
I can start and then give.
Right. So I know that I'm just going to recite off what I know are questions about this, and you can probably respond to some of this. I think each one of the commissioners would like to know how you would condition the property or propose to condition the property to address this rental issue, not owner-occupied. So you can kick off that with a bang and how you go about neighborhood notification. And then I'm going to pass it over to Nicolo to start on that end. So please answer if you can.
Okay, I'll start with the neighborhood notification one.
Sure.
We also did a couple of neighborhood meetings, resident meetings. We used the cities list, and then we actually went on whitepages.com and looked at the neighbors in Tiburon and elsewhere that were not on the list. So we were pretty aggressive. The first meeting, there were people who couldn't come. They called us up. We said, well, let's have a second meeting. So we really tried to outreach as much as we can. On the second unit issue, this is something, again, that is peculiar to the ownership of this property. The housing element, as Adam pointed out, does not say that second units are owner-occupied. It's the city's ordinance. And then the PD overlay that we're requesting would allow those, it would allow us the flexibility. All the second units in Corte Madera, as I understand it, are rentals. It's just the owner issue, and on this site, we have one owner. It's us. So we're not going to be living in each of them, but we're sure going to be controlling who is living in each of those because we have rigorous resident selection, resident qualification. I think we can assure that we have fantastic residents, probably better than anybody who buys a lot and puts up a house.
Thank you. All right, I think each commissioner may ask the question in a different way or a
Okay.
specific manner, but I appreciate that introduction to your thoughts on it. So with that said, Nicolo, what kind of questions do you have? For
I'm none at this point right now.
Okay. Phyllis,
Well, I like the idea you have the management office on site. Are you always planning to have a management office on site? I think that makes a big difference.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We have a dedicated community manager, service people there, several other people. We have 126 apartments now. And the price of those apartments and the rents we're achieving really require a high level of customer service. It would not be a property where we'd send management somewhere else because we want to work with our residents and make them happy every single day. So that's part of our business.
And since the drawings of the units, which are very attractive, by the way,
Thank you.
are half done, shall I say, we don't see a floor plan, how would one obtain access to the second unit from the major unit at the lower level?
They would be rented the same way as,
No. How do you access?
Oh.
How do you get into
i-
it?
it's a separate entrance.
Definition requires a separate entry for
Yeah.
the,
Separate
yeah.
entry,
Do you want that?
and it is completely blocked from, I'll call it the main house,
Yes, yes,
just, so it's just that they're attached and one's bigger than the other.
yes,
Easy way to describe
yes,
it.
exactly. And it would have its own entrance, its own parking area. It's a separate unit.
Excuse me?
He's saying it's restricted in size as well per the second unit ordinance,
Would have common walls.
common walls.
Commonwealth,
Yeah.
so it's attached, yes.
So it's like a duplex where one is much larger than the other.
Exactly.
That's all I have
All
right
right.
now.
It says in the regulations that it's 350 to 750 square feet for the second unit. So that is a bedroom, hotel room, and a bathroom. I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
So,
Sounds like a junior, second
right.
junior if it's
So,
250.
but it's 750 is good size. So, Dr. Bundy, any questions for the applicant?
Yes, in regard to the second unit, if your business model changed and you sold the property, how would would there be a new regulation that would say it would have to be owner occupied? Maybe Adam can answer that.
Well, one thing we've been considering is if the property were to be sold, these will be separate lots, and it could revert to the existing ordinance.
Yeah, I mean, we've been doing some preliminary thinking on that as well, but I think that's definitely something that could be considered as part of any.
In other words, it could be a
Restrict-
condition placed upon that, and it rides in perpetuity with the property, not as a element that ends at sale.
There are some preliminary discussions, and certainly the applicant and their attorney can address that, that if that would be the desire of the town, then not only may it be a project condition, but the applicant can offer to have the property deed restricted so that it's actually recorded that way.
Okay. The other question I had, the trail going up to Ring Mountain from the upper parking lot, it looks like there are some spots that are for public parking for someone to come up there and use that trail because they're not designated with an apartment number. Is that correct?
Yes, there is some parking. It's a town street that goes up through Preserve at Marin now. We plan to keep that trail open. Obviously, the public and residents have enjoyed it for a number of years, and even though it's on our property, we know it's important to the community.
The new driveway you're proposing for the upper property would appear to take out those current parking spots for the public. So is there a plan to replace those or put those someplace else?
Yeah. Okay. Brett, I'll let you address the public parking. I don't believe that this area right here, although it doesn't have apartment designation, is public. I think it may be guest parking, but is that correct?
I think it's just the end of a road.
Okay.
People do park there, but it's just the end of a road. It kind of terminates.
There's a trash,
So,
But relative to, I mean, there are some spaces there, and we haven't really looked at this area in great detail, but the thought is basically the trail also comes off about there, and it kind of winds its way up kind of through there. And I think as we refine the design here, if we need to provide extra parking down at the base of that, we could find a way of doing that. The intent is certainly to maintain or to recreate the pathway up to Ring Mountain that's independent of the driveway.
okay. The other question I had in regard to the upper property was, how is developable potential determined on that site? You've outlined what you say is developable. Understand the Star Tulip is an area you'd want to avoid, but how is that determined?
So between the R1C and the the HLC overlay, it defines what area can be developed.
Does this relate to slope?
Yeah. Right.
Okay.
So it's
All right, can you repeat that for the record?
Sure.
please?
It's a combination of the setbacks that are required on the site, the areas that are less than 30% grade, and then any other, specific site features. I don't know that the planning actually precludes the star tulip, but I mean, that was something we considered.
Okay. The final question for now is, there's been a lot of concerns about traffic on Paradise Drive. There are already a lot of units that are there, so I understand this doesn't add that much to it. One of the big concerns that's come before the town council is the school traffic related to children that are living there and at the preserve that attend the Reed School. And the town is ponied up $25,000 to sort of supplement this school bus to take kids to the Reed School District and actually the school bus system in Tiburon and Belvedere. Is there any thought to contributing to that in some way to help decrease traffic on Paradise?
I'll let Brett respond to that.
Sure, there's two parts. One is traffic, and the other one's parking. I'll kind of handle them separately if I could. As far as traffic goes, we engaged in the early part of this. We engaged W Trans, who's well-respected traffic engineer here, to study the site. The determination that we got back was that this development would be imperceptible as far as traffic goes. As for parking, the homes currently have a two-car garage plan for the first floor, which would take care of the primary house. And there's a parking spot adjacent to the home for any that have a second unit in them. So everything's self-contained within the site, not adding to any of the conditions around the site, which we know get strained by the schools.
That doesn't answer your question, Dr. Bunny, as to
Yeah.
how they might contribute to the school busing that currently is being funded by the town to some extent, and how you might either address participation in that or augmenting that.
We haven't researched that. It's something we certainly take into consideration. We know where that bus picks up on the corner of our site right there, and certainly something we take into future consideration. Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter.
What,
Can I ask,
please.
came to mind after I finished asking questions. My assumption is that the second units fall into the categories of affordable housing. I noticed there was no mention made of anything about ADA accessible, or any of the units ADA accessible.
Well, again, we haven't really gotten into that level of design. I think the second units are single story, one story for the most part. The other units, the larger units, are multiple story. I think the code actually, because these are only 2-unit buildings, does not require them to be accessible. But obviously, as we get into the design, we're going to make them as accessible as is possible.
No, it may not require accessibility, but with an aging population,
Right.
and we're looking at affordable housing, people moving out of large houses into smaller second units, et cetera, that accessibility would be important. Just the fact that it's one story, is the entrance on a level, or is the entrance up 6 steps? That makes a difference in accessibility.
Right. Yeah, and again, we've just done very preliminary design. The ground floor units are basically at grade, so that, they're not raised up on a podium. And again, the multi-story buildings could have, an internal elevator. We just haven't gotten to that level of design yet.
No, I'm not saying that all of them should be, but it's something to keep in mind for some of them.
Sure.
All right, thank you. Jennifer, I'm going to turn to you and ask you what questions you have for the applicant.
Okay. Can you just clarify again, so with the second units, are you renting them separately from the primary units, and it's just being treated as an additional unit that you're controlling the tenancy of?
Yes.
Okay. And do you typically do 1-year leases, or what's?
At least 1-year leases.
Okay, thank you.
We very rarely do anything less than that.
All right, but before you run away, Patty, so when we're talking about the company, Aimco as a whole, and how it operates and what its business model is, and the possibility that this might go up for sale at some point, what is the track record of a turnover of a property like this? Do you guys invest to create value and then sell the projects? Is this either the preserve or this project one that would ultimately or could be considered as a project for sale?
That's a great question. We buy properties in great locations and add value, but we're a long-term hold. This property is a long-term hold for the foreseeable future. We think it's an irreplaceable location. And again, we've already put in $125 million, so it would be very doubtful that this would be a candidate for sale anytime soon. And if you look at even the press releases on the groundbreaking and the opening, you'll see our chairman's remarks that he's waited his whole life to have a fantastic property like this. So it'd be very unlikely.
All right. Okay, thank you. When I hear the potential rent listed in your public comments response section for the second units, it talks about $2,500 a month for the second unit, roughly, anticipated. And so at $30K a year, so I don't know what economic standard you're anticipating be the typical renter for these units. You know, if that's a third of income, so that's $90,000 to $100,000 sort of income for a person. So that's a not exactly low income. Maybe in Marin it's low, but respond to that about what your target is for that and how you're going to create them affordable. How would you propose conditioning these units in perpetuity with what kind of rent control upon yourself to maintain affordability for these units?
We'd have to look at that. We looked at the studies that Adam referenced earlier in Marin County and what were the costs and prices of second units, and I believe they were from 0 to 4,200 in this county and in Corte Madera. Truth be told, this will be decided way later when we figure out what the size of the units are, the cost of building it, when we do studies on what is affordable, what the income levels are. So we probably shouldn't have put that $2,500 number in there, as we were even talking earlier tonight. But that'll all be to come, and we're happy to take a look at what the town requires or would like to see for affordability for those units.
It is mentioned in your comment section that you've been, I don't know, for lack of a better word, lobbied by the schools for housing or local residents to have second unit housing for short, maybe a year and so forth. So that would infer that that's the market you're satisfying, and it's not a high-income market, and it's a low to median income. And so if we were to look at this, we would want to condition that in such a way that an economic formula would apply to this, and you would self-impose a rent control on the properties, if it were approvable.
Yeah,
So-
we'd be happy to entertain that. We did go visit with the schools as our neighbors, as we did with all the neighbors, and you're quite right. They were thrilled to have something that would be affordable to their teachers, and we sort of looked at what their income were right next door. They could just walk to work and walk back. But we'd be happy to consider some sort of conditions on that.
Would you consider that the larger units would subsidize the junior units or the second units, so to speak?
We'd have to run
Yeah, so it's not-
the calculations, but they would have to if it was that low income.
Right, okay. So I think with regards to Bob's question about the trail access and so forth, that would require from the town some sort of easement, so to speak, or a declaration of an easement perhaps up there across the property for a trail. Would you guys be willing to include that in that R1 zoning parcel as a trail easement across the property and grant parking access at the top of Robin Drive?
Sure. I think effectively there is an easement, or there is access. I'm not sure, we were a little wrapped around the axle on whether there actually is parking there. It's street parking. But suffice it to say at this point that we know the community is interested in it. We have opened the property for hikers and would like to continue to do so, and would be happy to work out the details.
All right. I'm going to ask Adam for a couple answers. Thank you. And
Okay,
then we'll
thank you.
open it up to public comment. So I think one of my questions, Adam, was about that easement or encroachment. So it sounds like they're open to that, and we might want to put that on it. Then if it's a for sale unit, a condo, are they required to have one unit per so many for ADA accessibility versus rental units? Where does that fall in the regulations? I'm thinking about the Casa Buena project where one unit was
Yeah, no,
ADA.
I was thinking of the same thing, and I think it may, if I understand the architect correctly, and it relates to how many units in a particular building, but I'd have to follow up on that with probably our building official and get back to you on that.
Okay.
But that's my understanding. And as you know, the Casa Buena ones had, I think, about four units in each building, and they had 16 units. Yeah.
All right. So with that said, I'm going to open the meeting to public comment. So please, I'm thrilled and dying to hear what the public has to say about this. Please step up to the microphone, state your name. You have 3 minutes to express yourself at the microphone, please.
Hello, my name is Don Love, and I live on Paradise Drive. And just a couple of issues I would like to have you consider and address. One of which is within half a mile of the property, you have 3 jurisdictions. You have the town of Tiburon, you have the town of Corte Madera, and you also have the county of Marin. I think it might be a worthwhile exercise to involve in the EIR process the oversight's not necessarily the right word, but some review by those other jurisdictions to ensure some level of continuity there, so that all of these efforts, it gets very complex, of course. And living on Paradise Drive, we've noticed that the traffic increase has been palpable. Like it's quite extraordinary, and one way to mitigate that is incorporating buses for schools, but I think if you do a little research on that, the curves of Paradise Drive limit the size of the bus. And so that might be, albeit sounds like a great process, but that might be a difficult thing to accomplish. And then lastly, I would just like to, I'd like to have some consideration made with respect to exactly what the agenda is. AIMCO is a New York Stock Exchange company. They are in the business, they are a REIT. I suspect they have some restrictions in terms of what they can do with the assets that go in their portfolio. And it might be good to have a slightly higher level of transparency there in terms of what the real agenda is, in order for you to have a more schooled, if you will, approach to your approval process here. And anyway, so I just want to, in summary, I just want to highlight a lot of the discussion has been around the second unit, affordability at $2,500 a month, maybe a little suspect, and I think perhaps some of the underlying issues on environmental impact should be addressed first. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please. If you could, if you intend to speak, please stand up behind the microphone. We have.
Hi, Sherry Vigneron, 125 Westwood Drive. Actually, today was the first I heard about this project. My backyard, I can actually look out into the balcony apartments on Robin Drive, and they all look in my backyard, so I consider us neighbors. So it'd be great to be included in your communications. I would ask that we look at this project as one property, not an upper and a lower. And the documentation, I didn't have much time to look through it, but it's a little confusing where it talks about the HLC overlay. In the documentation that, in the appendix, it says that the HLC allows 15 single houses, 21,728 square feet each. And you're all talking about one house. So is that something you're planning but could be changed? And if we're not looking at this as a property as a whole, could then we, as a town, come up with some greater issues? The other question I have is, how is the ridge line not impacted by that house up on there? It's all really nice open space right now. So that would be helpful to see some sort of illustration so that we all as a community can see what that means as well as open space. And then my other question is that how do we ensure that these second units will actually be rented? So, you know, and actually get the housing that we think we're going to get. Because if I rent the main house, rent the second unit and have one nice big house, and the town really not meet the housing needs that we're after? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next.
Jean Greenbaum. I just have a question about why we're calling these things second units. They're not second units. They're just more units, and I don't know whether the total units, including these second units, are within the housing element or within the density on this property. These aren't second units. They're just additional units, right? I think we all agree. So it's a misnomer that I think is very confusing and really isn't giving us a clear picture. I just have a question about that.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? If you do, please stand up, line up behind the microphone. I would appreciate that. Please queue up.
Hello, my name is Helene Marsh. I also live on Paradise Drive. And my question has to do with the sustainability components of the project. And just wondering whether, I live actually I'm in Tiburon, so I'm not 100% familiar, and I apologize, with the Corte Madera green building standards, but I'm imagining that there are, because most of the communities in Marin have them now. So I'm imagining that you would be asking the developer to abide by the standards of green building which are appropriate for Corte Madera. And I know that in Tiburon now they're pretty high. And so I would also suggest actually requesting that the developer use a particular standard, whether it's LEED or Build It Green or some other recognized standard which imposes, some clear sustainability principles. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Deb Patani. I live on Park Place in
Could you
Tiburon.
speak in the microphone? I didn't hear that, please.
Deborah Patani. I live on
Thank
Park
you.
Place. I'm concerned about the house that's going to be built on the upper level. From what I can tell from the maps and the guides here that I'm looking at, it looks like it's going to be built right at the top of the ridge. I mean, it's cutting right through the path that leads to the Ring Mountain Trail, from what I'm looking at here. I don't know why it couldn't be tucked down into, there's a lower building pad there so that a house wouldn't be visible so much from the ridge line. When you're looking at that ridge, to see a house there is going to just ruin. I mean, you're right next to open space there. It's going to totally impact all of this natural beauty. And if they have to build a house there, I don't understand why they couldn't tuck it into that lower pad, that lower part of the upper lot. Because this is going to be right up on the ridge, isn't it? Or is it? Am I
Please you
reading this
keep
wrong?
your comments to the commission. Thanks.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It looks like it's going to be right up on the ridge, which I think could greatly impact this whole area, having a single huge house up there. So that's and also how looks like the house is right in the middle of the path leading to Ring Mountain right now.
All right, thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Annette Harris, and I live on Cibrian Drive, where I have resided for the past 23 years. And I just want to share with the commission, this is not our first rodeo with development of this property. For those of you who've been around for 20-plus years, it's not the it's not the first attempt to develop this property. And I like the word neighbor. I'm not so much feeling like I'm a neighbor, because the last time there was construction of the property that Aimco is so proud of, and it is beautiful, it took an inordinate amount of time and a lot of lack of consideration for the neighbors. And I just want to be sure that that is addressed. And I also, secondly, want to address the fact that some of us have ordinances, if you will, or CCNRs that protect the wildlife corridor. This was brought to the attention of Aimco. And I think one of the solutions was simply not to put in fences. I don't think that's a responsible way to approach that aspect of this beautiful piece of property. Housing, yes, is one thing, but trees, landscaping, et cetera, should also be taken into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Who else would like to step up and make a comment tonight? Surely there is more out there. All right. So I do not see anybody wishing to continue the public comment section on this proposal, so we'll close that public comment section. We'll take it back up here to the commission. And I'm going to start over on my right with Phyllis to talk about some of these issues. We're not in a formal formal presentation here, so I think we can take some of these public comments and speak to them with questions or what we would like to see the applicant address.
Well, one of the things that was mentioned by, I think it was the first speaker, had to do with an EIR. And I wanted to know how would this development end up requiring an EIR? What would be the considerations that we need to do?
Well, we're not, I mean, we don't even have an application yet, so.
Oh, I realize that, but I'm saying.
Until we get one, we have to, there's a process basically where you get the application and you do an initial study on the proposal, and ultimately that's what leads to a potential of.
What kind of conditions would lead to that need in general?
I think it's hard to decide that at this point until you have an application that can be evaluated. Just to more broadly address your question and the community's concern is that for this project as well as any other, and Adam can speak to it as the application comes in and staff evaluates it for environmental issues. There's a CEQA checklist that is evaluated, and at that time, based on the initial study, or it was the CEQA checklist, and then a determination whether you need an initial study, and that will drive what type of environmental review is required. And then sometimes, there are other considerations.
I mean, I think it's a very general answer. I mean, if there are indications that there are significant impacts that could not be mitigated or potential mitigation measures for them, that could then influence the decision to have an EIR done.
From the explanation that was given, most of these things seem to have been addressed in the plan. I mean, of course you have to see an exact plan, but as far as the water course, the trail, et cetera, that these things are. We talked about the size of the second units. What are you thinking about, what kind of a range for the initial units?
Well, I think that, are we asking to, if we ask them to stand up, we'll end up opening it back up here, I think, for public comment. So I think we could have that.
I think it's in the materials.
Yeah, it is
somewhere.
in the material, and they had a rental,
Well, yeah,
proposed
well, the
rental.
they've discussed that, but they really didn't go into details.
All right, let's save that for a series of questions that we'll ask them, if I may say that we'll ask them a series of questions as we get through after we get through some commentary here.
Oh, okay, well, as long as we're saving that, I'd
Yeah.
like to know what size they'd like the large
Right.
house at the top to be.
Right, okay. But please proceed with some other,
Okay. I noticed where the, it's the driveways, the lower lot, your lower area. And where the access is from the, I'll call it the private road that the homes are off of. You've got two accesses to Robin Drive. And I am just curious in looking at this on the left. You've got B and two arrows. On the right, you've got A and two arrows.
They're views of the renderings, actually, at the end of the package.
Oh, and then where the access roads come in, if I remember correctly when we were out there, that is the area where the parents who are doing pickup from the Montessori school tend to line up and park along that area. And I'm wondering if there is gonna be difficulty having, ingress and egress with all these cars parked, because there's about a half an hour to 45-minute span that these cars are lining their way up the hill, but especially at the bottom.
I think that it's a valid point, and I think that they're going to have to do a traffic study that's going to discover that. They're going to have to do some observation, and it's going to turn up in the report about what happens in reality out there in place every day.
Yeah.
And they're going to have to address it.
If I remember correctly, not only is it blocking that whole area, it also creates the turning on and off of Paradise Drive.
Right.
When we had the Montessori schools been in front of us talking about doing some expansion of parking, et cetera.
Right. So there's.
So it's something I think to be kept in mind.
Okay.
And that's about it for now. If more people ask questions, then it's come to
Okay.
mind.
Bob, I'd like your thoughts, on what you've heard and what we want to find out.
Don Love asked about the three jurisdictions that are sort of potentially overseeing this. And my recollection is that at the time the Nature Conservancy purchased the Ring Mountain property, there was a consortium of communities, including, I think, Mill Valley, as well as the county and Tiburon, that decided what was capable of being developed on that site. And so I'd like to know, are there any more individual properties that are in proximity to this that have the potential for housing or to be developed in any way? Or is the rest of it designated permanent open space at this point? So that was my first thought on responding to that. I like the concept of the green building and the LEED standards, and the architect has talked about trying to achieve that. I would ask about the possibility of rainwater harvesting at the bottom of this swale with, sinking a 10,000-gallon polypropylene tank to capture rainwater and then to reuse that for irrigation purposes. Because as I understand it, that's going to remain as a natural swale. And then I'm not sure how ridgeline development is determined. Certainly the upper parcel is on a ridge that's going up to the ridge of Ring Mountain, which is considerably higher, but when I'm walking up there and looking at the site for the house, it really does seem that it's going to be sitting out there in the middle of what everybody had hoped would be permanent open space. And you've done a nice job of clustering the lower development, and I would like to see this, clustered lower, maybe more to the east of the property. I think walking around up there, I think the views would still be fantastic over the apartment complex, and that it looks like, more of that area is developable, and you could stay away from the star tulip if that's a concern. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Bob. Nicolo, I'd like your thoughts on this, what you've heard tonight so far.
Sure.
The unit size, et cetera, that we've got before us.
Okay, if I can, I'd like maybe to ask staff, maybe helping to understand something. On the report, requested actions, page number 2.
Right.
Under second units,
Mhm.
second paragraph,
Mhm.
IMCO believes any reasoning behind the code's owner occupancy requirements, such as concerns over property maintenance and tenant selection, can be equally or better addressed, so on and so forth. So the question is the objectives of the requirements of the town is for affordable housing, to provide affordable housing. Is that correct? To be able to purchase?
The town's policies, yes, as stated in the housing element, are pretty clear about this, as that second units are a key factor in achieving the affordability goals, housing goals. And this property in particular would provide, as the applicant said, 8 of those, from about half of what we are hoping to achieve in our housing cycle.
But they wouldn't be able to be purchased. That's my point. These would be rentals.
In this case, yes.
Right. So if we approve the project and we change the zoning ordinances for this specific site, then is the town obliged to look elsewhere for the same conditions, so to then offer affordable housing somewhere else?
I'm trying.
Yeah.
I'm trying to understand the question. I don't think there's any obligation. We went through the housing element process and identified the housing opportunity sites back last year that would be.
But one would be this one.
Including this one, including 1421 Casa Buena, including the Warnham Drive site, and et cetera. They're all outlined there. So those are outlined in the housing element as the ways that the town is going to meet its affordable housing goals. Now, next cycle coming around in 2023, when the next housing element is going to be required, at that point, yeah, the town will have to reevaluate where and how, and it depends on numbers and et cetera, what the requirements will be. But presumably we'll have to reevaluate where additional units might go in the 8 years after that.
Yeah, but maybe I'm confused. If we approve the project as is, as the application would be,
sorry?
If this project, they're asking to remove the second unit as be able to be purchased.
No,
directly.
there's no. The only thing that the housing element says is that it's second units shall be provided on the site. Whether it's rental,
Okay.
whether it's purchased, it's not specific to an ownership provision. The zoning code is where there is an ownership provision. So it's basically, the housing element is saying build second units. Doesn't matter, it doesn't really specify whether they're rental or ownership. The zoning ordinance is
Okay.
where it says, if you are building a second unit, it's required that one of the dwelling units, either the second unit or the primary residence on a site, shall have an owner-occupant, shall be occupying that site. And that's the provision in the zoning ordinance that the applicant is putting forth tonight and presenting and saying, they would like to modify that requirement for this particular site.
Understand. So, okay, so my thoughts are that the the site, the project merits, I mean, it's an incredible project you put forth. You can see, I mean, it's so preliminary right now, but you can see that your intent is to study every option, and I've captured the intent that you have to avoid clustering everything together at the same time, to be really sensitive to the surrounding. I think it's really pretty, and I liked it a lot. So, and also I know you're going to be addressing traffic, and I mean, looks like you have the right intent. However, I think it would be also very important, and I would be in support of more complex outreach to the neighborhood. And I don't know how big of the neighborhood, but it is a sensitive area, has a lot of traffic problems, expressed many times, and indeed is evident, traffic, parking, and so an outreach with specific feedbacks that would address concerns, traffic, density, natural environment. I think that would be it's something that that area should have, and that's about all I have to say.
All right, thank you, Nicolo. I'm going to just see if I can help clarify some of what you were asking about, and that is the second unit issue, in that this would satisfy the housing element second unit requirement. We would not lose these units in some way as part of satisfying the second unit requirement. So we would achieve a significant leap toward that. So I don't know, you were asking, did we have to look elsewhere for it? And the answer is no, because this would be satisfying all of that. And nothing is for sale. If the application came before us, we would be able to condition it, I think, and come to an agreement about how the units would be rented and controlled for that purpose. At least that's what I'm hearing here
Right.
tonight and so forth. With that, I will ask Jennifer about her reaction to this so far.
I have a question for maybe Adam or Judith about the housing element and the affordability computation. Is that part of the housing element? Is that in order to be affordable? I guess I'm still probably where Phyllis was. Just, is it only affordable because the units are small, and so therefore on a per square foot basis, the maximum rent's going to be $2,500 or whatever it is? So therefore, we're calling that affordable because it meets some percentage median income, or?
Well, I think this is what we wanted to put forth, staff wanted to put forth to the commission tonight. I mean, second units as described in the housing element and as described, you know, as we're trying to encourage it, and it's a countywide effort in a sense, is thought of as affordable by design in a way. And those studies and surveys that were in the housing element last year and you know, sort of brought up by the applicant, that has been accepted by the state, but it's also been sort of borne out in some of the statistics that is a way to achieve moderate, whether it's moderate, low, or very low income housing. So, however, you know, I think the question that staff wanted to put forth to the commission is, in this particular case, and this is somewhat unique in the fact that it's a new development, subdivision, 15 units, you can see the quality and whatnot that's being put into it. And I think with this, Chairman Chase has touched on this, you know, is there a need to sort of go beyond that, sort of let the market play out and encourage some sort of, whether it's restrictions, and I think we've heard some of that answer tonight from the applicant that they're willing to entertain that, but that was sort of, wanted to put that in front of the commission and see if the commission felt that it was necessary to go that route, or whether it should be sort of, as by design, is adequate for what we're trying to accomplish in terms of the housing goals. I don't think it's the policy statements in the housing element don't necessarily get to that level of, I think, specificity or detail. I mean, it clearly, I think, is an open question, how the town wants to approach that in this case, and looking for guidance from the commission, how they want to
Whether we think it's
achieve the
important and
goals,
how do
the
we
intended,
achieve
essentially achieve the intended goals that second
Right.
units are.
Which I think that is part of the
Affordable.
intended goals, is that they are
Yes.
affordable, and then the definition is
How to,
what is affordable, and
right.
understood. Okay, the other question I have, and maybe this comes out through a more detailed traffic study, but, you know, have we considered, or should we consider, you know, a signal that would be required at the bottom of Robin Drive, given, I don't know what the traffic is like there now with the current 168 residents, or the school traffic or whatever, but do we need to consider a signal, and would that be part of?
Yeah,
what we might
that's a good
require?
question. I mean, that would be part of an analysis that would be done for,
Okay, through a
that would,
traffic
through a
study.
traffic analysis, and that would identify the volume of cars going through that intersection.
Okay. And then one of the comments was around, I guess, CCNR's, I think it was a woman who was on Sabrian Drive, and the wildlife corridor, which maybe is that something we should address in the staff report of maybe what that is, or how that, I don't know the answer, I'm just putting it out there.
Yeah, well, I think that's definitely part of something the commission could ask the applicant to consider, and as they further develop the site plan, you know, if that's important, that they consider that, then I think there'd be good feedback for them to hear that at this point. I mean, I don't think there's any necessarily code requirements for that or whatnot. As far as I'm aware, I would like to, you know, think more about what Commissioner Bundy talked about with the prior sort of, was it Conservation Society of Marin, or, you know, and look into that, but conservationally, but in any case, that can be worked into a design if that's important to the commission.
And what you're gonna try to address with Commissioner Bundy's comment is, what is the ownership and development?
Well, if there were any sort of policies that related to Ring Mountain and surrounding development, I think is what you're going to, and how that development should interact with the open space.
Those would be identified during the application process, yes.
Yeah,
Right.
yes, and it just takes a little bit of research, and so.
Phyllis, you had another question?
Because of what Jennifer brought up, asking about the affordable housing. ABAG gives us, tells us how many of each type of affordable unit we want. So many moderate, so many low, so many low moderate and stuff. And we don't know, number one, if any of these second units fit into those categories. We would have to find out, because someone spoke from the applicant saying that this should take care of half of our affordable units, second units, we don't know. Plus the fact on page 7 of their proposal, they list the lower north parcel allowed use. They say 14 of the homes are at market rate and 1 is affordable. And then they just list underneath that second units. There's no discerning affordable second units, you know, or any of that. And these are things that we'd have to know, and they would have to be presenting to us, because if we're going to use these units to fulfill some of the ABAG requirements.
Let me just try to go back on that, because we've fulfilled the ABAG requirements for the 2015 to 2023 housing element. So that's done. We said that the town has sites available and has these policies in place to develop second units, and these second units are affordable by design, et cetera, et cetera. So that's fulfilled. What we do report on the number of affordable units that to ABAG that will be built during the cycle. So there's the actual, in 2015 we say, this is how we can achieve this. And they say, okay, your housing element is certified. And now we report on, well, did we achieve it or not? But there aren't really consequences other than that, then, with the exception of that number gets factored into a complex formula, likely, which hasn't been determined what that is yet, to come up with the next number in the future. So it's,
They give us the right one this time.
well, right, so just I'm trying to be clear on that. There's no obligation to actually build those units, but from an ABAG standpoint, that we said this, in 2015, this is how we're gonna do it.
Okay, so we don't,
We've met the goals.
all right, so we don't even
Now, I
be
think-
concerned about the afford. the
Well, I think,
affordable
so
homes.
I think this is getting into some of the details here, but just to, it is a point, the way that the housing element sort of laid out how this would be done. So if you think about this, and this is actually beneficial, and I don't want to go into the details here, but basically it says if these eight second units that you're going to build, those sites or those housing units don't count towards the otherwise applicable inclusionary housing ordinance that we have in town, which normally requires for 10 or more units in any one site, a 25% affordable requirement. There's some complications with that, but nonetheless, that's how it's laid out in the housing element. It says you basically subtract that out, so you're left with still a inclusionary requirement, but not based on the 16 units or the 15 units that the applicant's proposing, but based on 7 or 8 units that is left over. And that requires that 7 or 8 still does trigger the inclusionary requirement for 1 unit or for an in lieu fee based on that. So that will be explained in an application. It's sort of the details, but it is laid out. And I think it's fair to say the applicant is following sort of how the intent of housing element policies that were laid out and adopted in 2015 of how to deal with essentially this exchange of second units for the inclusionary requirement.
I was thinking of what we did with Casablanca, the 16
That was,
units.
and that was
and how
inclusionary,
That was inclusionary.
right?
And that's why I was wondering, I was
And if you
looking
know-
at that in comparison to
That's
this,
right.
how we're gonna-
And it's a different formula if you call that was 16 unit project, and there was 3 affordable units, 1 low, 1 very low, 1 moderate.
Okay, Dr. Bundy, quickly.
Yeah, in regard to the wildlife corridor and the proximity to the open space, my reading of the project was that you weren't going to have fences with any of the structures, including the upper house that you're proposing on the upper property, and I just wanted to confirm that.
Yeah, I think that's the case, and we could certainly condition that if that be the case, if we wanted to. I wanted to go through a series of elements that I want to give the applicant feedback with. And, but first, I don't know if Sherry is still here, yes, that this was noticed on Nextdoor. I know you're on Nextdoor, so it's there. And it's been out there a lot. So the notice is out. The town does a great job of posting this stuff, and if anybody's paying attention to the town, they'll get noticed. You sign up for email notifications with the town website, and you'll be given a lot of notice for just about anything. So that's possible, and as I understand it, the applicant really wants to make sure that everybody hears about it. What we don't want to have is this instance during the application process where people are going, I just heard about this, and I don't think that's going to happen if you guys really paper the neighborhood. And I also am going to ask staff to incorporate notices on the sites when applications like this come before the town. But what we have to do tonight is give some feedback to this applicant about a couple of things. And so we're in a sort of raise of the hand straw vote mode here. And what I'm hearing is we have the issue about owner occupancy versus a landlord providing second unit oversight. And I'm hearing that we've got the possibility of granting this in three different ways, but one of them is to put an overlay district over it. And we could probably find the right tool. But the question really is this a possibility before the commission, if we find the right tool and find the right device that really controls the units and really controls the rental of it, is that something that we're willing to let the applicant proceed with and provide a manner of evidence of doing this to us? And that's the first question that is the biggest question before us. Do we want to consider that in some manner with the right tools and the right conditions of approval once we saw it? Adam, you want to say something?
Well, I just want to clarify, just, right, the modification of the owner occupancy requirement is that's specifically what
Yes.
would be helpful to.
Right, it is that one requirement that we have to provide a overlay or a variance for.
Yeah, the overlay district would allow that, could be one of the mechanisms
Right.
to allow that to occur. And then, yeah.
So, in essence, there's not one, but there's some possible other ways of doing it, right? So, I think
Right.
I would like to just hear from each of you if you're willing to consider that process so that these guys could go forward with this, knowing that there's a tool or a methodology that they could figure out. So, Phyllis?
I would be willing to go along with it. I'm looking at, I guess, one of these three variables that start on page 2. And I would want to be sure that it's understood that there would have to be a management office on site. That's very important, and that's the key to it. And also, in looking at this, I looked at, I want to be sure it is limited to this site, because it looks like under 3 that, Adam, you were saying that we might want to be changing the zoning ordinance to allow this, and I would not want to do that on a blanket basis. I'd want to just have it this site, and if other sites come up, to look at them individually.
Right. Okay. Dr. Bunny?
Yes.
Yes. Niccolo?
Yes, I would like also see if it's possible to have some sort of neighborhood support in writing, something similar to what we did with the town center. Maybe it's just an idea, just to be more transparent, open. But yes, I think I'm in support.
Okay, so, I mean, you're saying that it has, yes, in principle, but a process in place to get it accepted more universally within the community.
I think it would be fair, yes, to at least explore and see if there are feedbacks that confirm our sentiment.
All right. Jennifer?
Yeah, I would consider the modification. I would ask the applicant to present ideas on how the second units may be considered affordable.
Yes, in the housing element plan, there's an entire workbook that we looked at during that process called Affordability of Second Units in Marin. That would sort of be one of the handbooks for us to guide us to some extent, and the applicant would have to come forth with their own charts of constitution of affordability. Each applicant that has come before us has had their own version of affordability. I'm sure you guys would have yours versus the County of Marin. So we know everybody has a different viewpoint on that. So that's important, though, is affordability, and that's one of the reasons why this is appealing, and I think you have to hear that's clearly in the presentation, that it is a part of the second unit appeal, affordability rather than market rate. So, and I say that having just read in the paper that in San Francisco they're saying if you limit housing rental rates, you're driving up the market for housing. And so there's two sides to this viewpoint. If you put in affordable housing and you limit it and rental rates are set, then somewhere higher rents get driven up. And I don't know. Jennifer probably knows all about that. But, so we would, I think, want to make sure that there is something about this in perpetuity, about the junior second units, that it rides with the property, that if,
Are they junior?
I mean, second units, yeah, second units, that they ride with the property, or that if at some point this turns into a condo conversion, that's a significant effort, but I would suggest that that might ride with the property. We have a lot of comments about the project greenness, and I know, speaking for myself, and I think that the other commissioners would support significant green measures that are some in the process of being reviewed, some have been adopted by the town. So California Green is adopted by the town. And as I look around, I would ask that there be some sort of assent to this, and that would include PV solar array as part of this. I think that we've asked for units to establish gray water systems, and with good design, you can take that gray water and water a significant amount of landscape out there. So I think that that's something that we've all talked about extensively. But one of the bigger issues that we've heard about, and each commissioner has spoken to tonight to some degree, is about traffic out there. And that's, in the morning out there, I think the residents will attest to what a congested area it is. And I've witnessed it not only on the week mornings and week afternoons, but on the weekends. It can be a problem out there. So I would ask that, and the commission would ask, that you guys figure out how to be a part of the community in creating a solution out there to this. And I think that providing for public transportation, pick up their bus stops and so forth, and perhaps figuring out how you might contribute to the busing solution for Reed School District, if so be it. Some towns have actual conditions that fund school buses and so forth, and we don't have that, but we have to ask you for it. And that would be a public relations marketing device, I think, in some way. So LEED standards are somewhat marketing standards these days, because everybody is building with pretty green stuff, and it's easy to get a LEED designation, but I think there are much more effective ways that go well beyond LEED to create a really green building and create neighborhood support for the project. And I think the other thing that everybody here has spoken to tonight about is that the ridgetop home, and I don't think there's anyone that hasn't seen the sensitivity of that, and I think you have to come back with an address of that or be prepared to fight for that. I think that it's something the community has spoken about, and everybody has talked about it here, that ridgetop home is a problem, and you stand there and you look around from the back of Marin Country Day School or anywhere there, and you don't see anything on that hilltop around you, but you would see that home. It would be a significant impact. So I've heard that from a number of people. So I would ask the other commissioners what else they would add to my comments about this. Phyllis.
Well, you brought up the photovoltaic and the gray water. I think that's important to look at that, and I agree with you about leads. Doesn't mean much anymore. You're next door to Marin Country Day School, and they have, over the years, made quite an effort to retain the greenery to make sure any buildings they put up are not blocking sites and stuff, and you may want to see what they've done and take a look at it, and sometimes it's not necessary to reinvent the wheel. And they have really done an outstanding job, that school. And they do a very good job when it comes to the traffic and the parking for those students. I think they set a very fine example. I wish others would follow. So that's about all. I'm looking at the things that the neighbors said, and I think we've kind of mentioned each and every one of them. Yeah, I think
All right.
I've got pretty much have, oh, there was one comment made by one person, Sherry, it was you, I just don't know why. She said to look at the property as one and not as an upper and lower, and I don't understand what difference that makes and how it's developed, do you?
The upper lot is RC1 and the lower section is, it's the same application that they're
Yeah.
going through here, so they are zoned differently. They have different uses on each parcel or each part of the lot.
Yeah, I just didn't understand what difference
All right.
it makes. That's it.
Dr. Bundy?
Nothing beyond what I'd mentioned previously, and I agree with the comments you made.
All right, thank you. Niccolo?
Same. I can't add anything else other than the PV. We all know that in some sites it works, some others doesn't. So maybe a study on the PV photovoltaic system would be very helpful for us to then determine. If you say no, we can't do it, maybe we can see some evidences. I mean,
Yeah, it's a fairly exposed site. Jennifer, any final thoughts from you about what these guys would like to hear from you about this project?
No, I think you guys have done a nice presentation and are clearly making an effort to work with the community and the surrounding areas. So that's appreciated.
All right, thank you, guys. I think that, it's a great project next door. The preserve looks great, and I hope that this would look as good, but I think that in the process, you'll find a lot of people coming out of the woodwork to talk about traffic, about the impact of this project, and you need to be prepared to address that, and the better outreach you do in front of that, the better we all are. Adam, anything you want to add to this?
No. No, thanks.
Okay. We'll ask Judith.
Peter, can I ask one quick?
Okay,
Can
yes.
I put just one quick note?
Yeah.
Is when we met, I recommended if you, I think at least, if you come here with letter of support by 500 people, I think that would really help lots of other people to say, well, this project seems to be accepted overall by the community. I think that's going to provide at least me with a lot of directions.
Okay. Do we want to let the applicant respond anyway, or not? No, I don't think so.
I think as long as they're clear,
Right.
I think you guys did a good job of summarizing,
Okay.
Peter
All right.
and Commissioner.
So- Okay, with that said, do you guys feel you have enough feedback from us? And I see nodding heads, so, okay. All right, thank you very much. All right, with that said, we'll close this item and we'll let the room evacuate with a 5-minute break here. Thank you. All right, let's, we're going to pick up where we left off. So we've reconvened and who's,
Yes, we're on.
the IJ is leaving, so,
Does that mean the meeting's over?
no.
It's a front camera. Streaming, we're still streaming
Just a
everyone.
reminder, we're still on camera.
Right, yeah, we're still being duly observed. So, thank you guys for all of that input. I'm just hoping that they went away with enough information to rethink. And,
They
and
seem satisfied.
I think that, I hope it's not, even if I'm on the record for this, I hope it's not a case where these guys go forward ignoring what has been said and land back in Adam's lap with the same project that it is now. Yeah,
When they,
Amen.
yeah.
Yes.
when they were
Okay.
going
Yeah,
in
let's-
and
let's-
bought
We can't-
that property,
Let's go to the
Yeah,
next.
we'll go to the
agenda
next
item.
thing.
they did a good job on the preserve because we put all sorts of conditions on them then because, remember, it was turned into condos,
I
went bankrupt,
didn't-
and then
we-
they came in.
Yes. All right, so here we have the Commissioners' Reports section of this meeting. So with that said, who has a meeting to report upon?
It was canceled last week.
That's right.
I
So
got a
nobody went,
behind.
but who went to the joint meeting? Anybody?
I
No,
went to the joint
you
meeting.
did. Dr. Bundy, would you please tell us something about that, if anything is pertinent?
The joint meeting with the Larkspur Corte Madera Town Councils to primarily discuss the proposed fire consolidation. They had a very good presentation from Jim Irwin, who was the sort of the consultant that was brought in, former fire captain from Southern Marin. And also discussed at great length by Todd Cusimano, who is, of course, our police chief, soon to become our town manager, but was because of his involvement with the police consolidation, was really working with the town of Corte Madera and the town of Larkspur on this consolidation. They reported they had made great progress. It's a very complicated process with problems with pension, salaries, structure, and going forward, they'll have to deal with assets of both towns to combine them together. But in general, there was support for doing that, and I believe this will go forward, and we will have a merged Corte Madera Larkspur Fire Department over the course of a year or two.
Great. That's good news. Director Adam Wolf, do you have anything to report to us tonight?
No, I was on, as you know, I was away the last couple of weeks. So saw some interesting things in New York and Connecticut. Actually saw some, went to my cousin's house up on Connecticut. He's on the Long Island Sound, and he lives on this island out there, and it's connected, but by a small bridge. Literally, I think 4 or 5 houses just in a 1 block area were being jacked up and lifted up. So it's just kind of been interesting to see what's going on over there after the aftermath of Sandy. And a lot of them are just being put on jacks, no remodel, because I think they got some money from FEMA to do so, but it's quite dramatic to see those houses way up there. And so just as we've talked about in the past, interesting to see what happens here related to that in the future. And got a chance to go to the top of Freedom Tower, One World Trade Center, which is pretty dramatic as well. And saw some good stuff in New York.
Cool.
But no, nothing. That was it. That was all. And happy to be back.
Well, we're glad you're back.
Yeah.
That's for certain. So,
I have something.
okay, a report, or it can't be,
Under board announcements, request reports,
You mean the tentative?
under 3
Yes.
tentative agenda items. One, we want to be sure to add
Elections.
the election
Yep.
officers. And number 2, and I've discussed this with Adam, and I'll give it to the others next time. I was looking at our rules and procedures, and they could use a little bit of updating a couple of ways. One, when we did, as a matter of fact, when we added this section, tentative agenda items, et cetera, we did not, it's not listed under our order of business. Yes, that's one. Another one is Article 6, or miscellaneous. We do have something that reads amendments to reference statutes. In other words, if the state statutes change or the town ordinances change, they will take precedence over what we have. But I thought we could add a sentence onto that stating something like, periodic review will take place to add any changes in the reference state statutes and town ordinances to this document. Maybe every couple of years, and then this is the one that people may be uncomfortable with, and it came up because a discussion I was having with Sloan, which reminded me of something. When I worked on this last year with you, Peter, I made a mistake. I left something out. Under 4.2, the preparation of the agenda, we've got a 4.2.2 of .1, but not a 4.2.2, which is placing an item on the agenda.
All right, I can see that.
And what it is, and as I say, discussed with that, I mean, in California, members of the public, and of course the commissioners in our case, can ask to have an item on the agenda. It is part of the rules and procedures for the council. It is written on top of every draft agenda they put out. I sent all of the stuff from Becca, who, God, she keeps notes and information, she's incredible.
So
What
it-
I wrote is, and I'll just read it, and everybody will have a copy next week. It would be called placing items on the agenda. Members of the public and or commission members may request to add an item on the agenda that is directly related to the business of the commission as defined under Article 1.1, purpose of the commission. I really am trying to limit, to be sure somebody doesn't come up with something that's not our concern. And then by submitting a request to the planning director or his designee, such requests are to be submitted in writing, including appropriate supporting documents and information if desired, at least 21 days prior to the meeting during which the item is sought to be considered. The item may be deferred to a later date with concurrence of the person submitting the item if time is needed to research the issue. And what I did is I took the wording from the council that Rebecca gave me and just limited it to be sure people understood it has to be related to the business of the commission, because there's all sorts of business the council has, which we don't.
So with that said, this is what you'd
So
like
I'd
placed
to
on
have
the
this
agenda.
on the agenda, and as I
So-
say, there'll be copies to everybody. Adam has a copy. I think I sent you.
Yes, you did, so. at
I
this
will-
point,
I will
You will agendize
Be
this
sure,
for,
yeah.
for discussion.
If
Right. So,
commission agrees, we'll put it on the, we can put
Please.
it on the
yeah,
next agenda, which, by the way, is down to, we're shooting for the 1441 Casa Buena being on, but I think 21 Endeavor, which I understand was at a late hour at the last meeting, but is not going to get on at the
That's
next.
Carla.
Yes, will be on in August,
so
and
21 is off.
1441, we are still, I would say, pretty confident at this point that that will
That
remain.
is not gonna be.
No, that it will.
Oh, it will be next.
21 Endeavor's being taken off.
Yeah.
So, with that said,
I think we gave the poor guy about 10 minutes because it was
Well,
almost 1
yeah,
o'clock in
it's-
the
it's
morning.
okay.
We couldn't see.
yeah, it was, what the issue is, I don't know if it's plan preparation or whatever, but that particular architect needs to up his game. So, anyway, so it's off, but I hope that when he does come back, it'll be a complete application, so, okay. 1441,
1441 is.
Stuart
that
Grundle.
one where the people bought it to keep it as apartments and going to upgrade them?
Right.
Okay.
It's, yeah.
All right, so I'm going to ask if we need to agendize anything relative to the encroachment discussion that occurred beyond what we had. Because we just simply heard Dave Bracken's presentation and, you know,
So it's our understanding that that matter is being referred back to the council.
Right.
And again, just for clarification, it wasn't a land use item. Council just had
Why?
referred the matter to get feedback from planning commission community So it's my understanding from the manager's office that that will be agendized for the town council, and then they'll get direction from the town council and determine whether council takes action or it gets referred back to here or some other department.
Okay, go ahead, Phyllis.
I've been talking to Sloan and asked me about it, and Sloan was surprised why I said, because I guess, Peter, you had told me that Dave was taking it directly to council.
Right.
And I said that's what I had heard, and Sloan said, but we wanted, or I said, wanted a recommendation from the commission. I said, we're happy to have it, but you have to talk to Dave and work it out with him, so I don't know what happened.
Well, it wasn't as if there was a clear set of options for us. I think it was more, I almost brought it with me tonight. It was not a full presentation. It was more about a particular problem that we were sort of reviewing, problems that occur due to easement or encroachment, confusion, problems, process, all of that. And I can't, now I'd have to go back and look at the meeting notes here.
Peter, you made a list. You sent me an email with the list. I couldn't find it.
Right. That list will be part of the minutes that will get,
Peter's list.
right.
Okay.
You sent Peter's list.
Well, oh, no, just what was on verbally read into the record
Okay.
that night. And there were, I don't have my
No,
notes,
Peter
but,
sent me an email saying that these were the things, I don't know if we had discussed it with Dave or not, that these were the things that you thought we should be looking at as respects, encroachments and stuff, and I can't find that email.
All right, so that's
We can-
off the
we can-
record here.
yeah, we
gotta-
can
just
discuss
gotta
that
get
later.
that. We
Okay.
gotta, we gotta go into another world here. So we will.
We don't have anything
I won't-
agendized
no,
at this time,
okay,
and
we won't do that, okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Commission will be posted on what is scheduled related to that.
What's the,
I said, we'll keep you posted on what is scheduled related to that encroachment issue.
because the one thing that Judith pointed out to us that was important, that we could not discuss, we had to speak in generalities, we couldn't discuss a particular topic because it hadn't been noticed. So if we're gonna have, if that's gonna come with us and it's noticed, notice has to go out.
right.
All right.
Can I-
Are we gonna do minutes without a minute taker here, or are we gonna wait till next
No, I
meeting?
think, I think we should do minutes tonight, that's fine.
Okay.
Let me know, I will, what will happen, and we're gonna discuss internally how to do this. As you know, the council actually doesn't have a note taker at meetings, but they send the audio to somebody else
Right.
who does the minutes. It's not Rebecca, but anyway, so we'll do the same for this meeting. We'll be sending the audio, and obviously now we have video as well, but anything that we want corrected, it'll be easy enough for our Joanne to actually make corrections.
Joanne, she's just missing this.
Yes.
Okay, we're not losing her.
Okay. So with that said, let's move on to the minutes of June 14th, 2016.
I'll move minutes.
I have a change for
What page?
page 3, and the paragraph that begins with Commissioner McCadden and Mr. Bush discussed,
Okay, so it's like the second paragraph.
yes,
Yep.
second paragraph, and this should be discussed how the parking lot to the east relates to the application.
Okay.
That was a request from Dan McCadden.
Okay.
Because the sentence did not make sense, specifically for the parking lot we were talking about.
Yeah, good point.
So
Okay.
I will move it with the amendment.
I have a change too.
Okay.
On page 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 paragraph. At the end says, however, he said he would not favor, and then delete an increase in the FAR without more studies. And sure, on the last,
Oh, however,
about
he
the-
said-
however,
okay, you would
yeah,
not favor.
however, he said he would not favor, and then after that delete everything and change to read residential housing development,
Okay.
especially adjacent to the freeway. That's it for me.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll try again. I will move the minutes of June 14th with, as amended.
Second.
All right.
Aye.
Aye.
All in favor? Aye.
All ayes.
Okay.
Okay, and then the minutes of June 28th.
I have a tiny little thing on page number 11.
I saw something yours on 5 too, I think you want changed.
Okay, go ahead, Nicolo. on
Just the
page
last
11.
paragraph, just add an A
Which one?
at the end of my name.
Oh, got it.
Yes.
That's it. No more.
Nicolo, on page 5,
Yes.
What is your change on that paragraph?
Add an A.
Oh, add an A.
To his name.
just spell his name right.
Oh,
Yeah,
Add an A,
sorry.
I thought that was some
Commissioner Dessa,
linguistic.
Right, on page 5.
5,
The
sympathy.
second from the bottom paragraph.
Yes,
Commissioner Caldera said the design is elegant.
and temporary.
And
Oh, contemporary, sure. Thank you. And temporary as well.
Instead of temporary.
Maybe I said temporary. Possibly.
And you were hoping for.
Thank you. That's
I
it.
will move the approval of the minutes of June 28th as amended.
I had one amendment
Oh.
on page 9. Jonna Hale has been
Oh, her name's
former
not
mayor
wrong.
and really the historian of the town, and we should always spell her name correctly, Janahaehel. And that, correct that in that paragraph.
I will move the minutes of June 28th as amended.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, with that said, do I hear a motion for adjournment of this meeting?
Can I ask a favor? On next meeting, the 1441 Casa Buena, I think, is within 500 feet of where I live. Maybe not, though, because we can measure it. I don't think so, but yeah,
Map on
the
the-
property is, but me, I am not. So I'm not sure if that's.
Well, we'll look into that. I think it's from the property, but he
Map
has
on the
a,
back of your book? Is that
No,
correct?
yeah, sure. That map, yes, but the reality, anyway. So, if we can, if I'm not sure, there's going to be only that in the agenda, or it's going to be more.
yeah, well, I think if that,
If
that will be a public hearing item, which will be first. And then if there's other items we agendize, that would be business after that, so.
If there are other things, we can just move it up. We've done that before.
if possible,
Okay.
not a big deal.
All right, with that
Thank you.
said, I heard somebody say I moved to adjourn, is that right? And
Move to adjourn. Thank you.
so we have a second, and we will adjourn the meeting. So moved.
Aye.
Aye.
I gotta tap the sound guy.
Communications.